Howdy, everyone. It's good to see you. More on a more regular. This was what, 2 days after I posted the thing? That's better. Everyone's home. Everyone's happy. I knew you were curious. They're upstairs right now, having a little snuggle time in the morning. I'm down here doing stuff for you guys. No, I had stuff to take care of. Don't feel bad. So, I did get home yesterday. I was able to edit the podcast and post it, and it sounds great, and I'm really happy about it. Here's what I'm going to say. I so want you to listen to this podcast, especially this episode, that I'm not even going to tell you to go to iTunes and click my link, and do all that stuff. I'm going to put a direct link in the info. Now, I explained the other day, maybe you didn't watch. Hey, cat, stop it. Go away. I sat down with Carter, and we interviewed Ron Smalec, and we talked about creativity, and stalling, and changing focus, and coincidence. We always talk about coincidence. And it turned into this sprawling 1-hour conversation about all those things. And a lot of the stuff that I said, I didn't plan to say before we started recording. It's just like, and this comes up in the podcast, that's the positive nature of what happens when you sit down in a group of people and start discussing things. And actually, I turned this on to spam you with that information, and then also to tell you this, because there's something that I would have brought up in the podcast if I had time. I knew that we were already running long, so I just didn't talk about it. I actually had to cut quite a bit. Carter, before I tell you that, I'll tell you this. Carter had said at the end of the recording something about, like, that's going to be way over what I thought our time limit would be, which I think he said was 40 minutes. Our time limit's not 40 minutes. Our time limit is an hour. I edit the podcast, and I will not go over an hour. And my feeling is that if I have more than an hour of good footage, that's what the outtakes are for. If I have to cut part of the conversation, I will take the worst part, even if it's all great. I will take the part that takes it over an hour and throw it in the outtakes, which is actually what I already did. Carter and Ron listened to it and probably like, where was the story about? It's in the outtakes. Okay, so here's the one thing that I didn't talk about that I would love to share with you, and I probably have already talked about, but that's not going to stop me from doing it again. John Cleese, of Monty Python fame, did a speech once, somewhere, I forgot the details, it's not important, about the nature of creativity and how he was able to be a more creative person than some of the other people that he worked with. And a lot of it has to do with time. You are not going to find the most creative solution to a problem, whether that is, writing a comedy script or figuring out how to get your daughter to stop crying at night, unless you give your brain the time you need to think on the problem. And he specifically talks about creating a space for yourself, which actually, the way that he describes it, sounds like meditation. He talks about disconnecting yourself from the outside world, unplug your phone. This, of course, was in the 90s. Turn off your cell phone, don't look at your computer, tell people around you that you can't be disturbed for a certain amount of time. And then focus on your problem. Think about it. Take notes. Brainstorm. Outline. Just think about all these different things that you have been jumping around in your head, but you haven't actually had the time to just write it down and think it through and explore other ideas. And then once you've done that, just sit around and wait for a while. And eventually you do have to stop. And that's why before you start, you should set a time limit for yourself. He recommends that you never do this for less than, I think he says 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And at the end of the time limit, you should probably stop. Maybe you could say, like, let me just maybe if you're on a really good roll, you're like, I'll give myself 10 more minutes. But if you are not thinking of anything, you can't think of something, just stop. Go back to your normal life, do something else. And that is when you will find that in the middle of the night, or when you're going to sleep, or when you wake up, or when you're having lunch, or when you're talking on the phone to your grandma, like all of a sudden you have this like, oh, there's the thing that I've been looking for. That's the thing that I was trying to figure out. Because you gave yourself the time to prepare your mind for that input. And if you hadn't set aside the time and brainstormed and thought about all the ideas, you wouldn't have that moment. Maybe, but probably not. And that method is what I've done with a lot of the series that I've got myself into with, like, that's the way that I figured out the Interrobang finale. That's the way that I figured out certain things that are in yesterday's news. I just, like, meditate on it and think about it really hard. And maybe I can't figure it out right at that moment, but some point down the line, all of a sudden it just pops into my head, and I'm like, that's it. That is the solution. That is what I should be doing. And it's an invaluable technique. And I will link, like I said, the MP3 to the episode on creativity, which I really would love you to listen to, especially if you've never listened to my podcast or you've never listened to a podcast. Just go listen to this. Just set aside 1 hour of time, set aside 20 minutes, and listen to the first 20 minutes. Because maybe you have no idea what you're missing. Please listen to it. Give us some feedback. I'm very curious. We've had very little feedback on this show. Carter has some friends and family, I think, who talk to him about what they think. But I've heard so little. It's a little frustrating. Listen to the episode, and then also, if you're curious, watch this speech that John Cleese did. It is like half an hour long, but it is worth it. It's also very funny, of course. It's John Cleese.